I'm Lisa. In this episode, the United States and Japan are trying to form a new NATO in Asia, and the Chinese and Russian militaries responded with strength. Taiwan spent $740 million to buy American arms, but the US neither delivered weapons nor refunded the money. China criticized the US for intimidating the World Anti-Doping Agency during the Paris Olympics. Italian Prime Minister visited China and expressed regret for withdrawing from the Belt and Road Initiative. Let's start with the new threat the United States poses to world peace. On the 28th of July, US and Japanese defense and foreign ministers held a Security Consultative Committee in Tokyo, the so-called 2+2 ministerial meeting. They were aimed to establish a new NATO-like alliance in Asia, and China and Russia responded with demonstrations of strength. The US Secretary of Defense announced the establishment of a joint force headquarters for US troops in Japan, intending to cooperate with Japan to unify the command of Japanese Army, Navy, and Air Forces. Before this decision, the US command in Japan was primarily administrative. Now it has been strengthened to a headquarter of joint forces for full-scale operation, capable of planning large-scale military operations with Japan. In addition, Japan provides bases for the US military power deployment in Asia, housing approximately 54,000 US troops, hundreds of aircraft, and the only forward-deployed US aircraft carrier strike group, along with enhanced missile production authorized by the US to support Ukraine. In the joint statement issued after the talks, the US and Japanese ministers said China's foreign policy seeks to reshape the international order for its own benefit at the expense of others, which puzzled many Chinese netizens. China served a significant role in ending division in Palestine by promoting the signing of the Beijing Declaration and boosting peace talks between Russia and Ukraine during the Ukraine's foreign minister's visit to China. Even Agence France Presse called the accusations against China a verbal attack. On the same day, the US and Japan conducted military exercise in Okinawa with 12,000 troops participating. The exercise involved 10 Osprey transport aircraft, which are notorious for their frequent accidents and raised significant concerns among residents living nearby. Since its operation started in 2007, there has been 70 deaths related to V-22 Osprey, with the most recent being in November 2023 when Osprey crashed near Yakushima Island and resulted in 8 fatalities. According to local media, the Okinawa Times, the day before the joint military exercise began, a large number of Japanese citizens held a protest rally at the gate of the military base. The US Secretary of Defense also emphasized the concept of extended deterrence, that is to deploy nuclear weapons to East Asia, and pointing out America's commitment to protect Japan. However, the Japanese media Asahi News stated that extended deterrence indicates Japan being increasingly dependent on the US, and the nuclear umbrella contradicts Japanese Prime Minister advocacy for a nuclear-free world. Last May, Kishida hosted the G7 summit in Hiroshima, where he announced the Hiroshima Vision on nuclear disarmament. However, since then, no concrete progress has been made. As a victim of nuclear attacks, Japan simultaneously calls for a nuclear disarmament while increasing its dependence on the US for nuclear protection, underscores a mounting paradox. On the other hand, when Japan faces immediate threat, the action taken by US have not always aligned with their stated commitment. On the 30th of July, 2 Russian nuclear-capable strategic bombers, escorted by jet fighters, conducted a routine flight over neutral waters in the Sea of Japan. The flight lasted more than 10 hours, and prompting the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force to scramble emergency takeoffs on 3 separate occasions. But the US effectively compelled Japan to remain on the sidelines. As the US-Japan ministerial meeting was taking place, China's newest aircraft carrier, the Fujian, completed its 3rd sea trial. The trial involved training for carrier-based aircraft operations, fleet air defense and sea control projects, as well as testing the data link system. Previously, Taiwanese authorities had assessed that mainland China would need at least 3 aircraft carrier battle groups before it could execute a viable reunification plan with Taiwan. These carrier groups would be deployed in multiple directions around Taiwan to perform tasks like blockades, isolating the island, or launch military strikes while also preventing U.S. intervention from different angles. The Fujian represents China's third such aircraft carrier. While the mainland China Navy may well be ready, Taiwan clearly is not, and much of this is due to US unfulfilled commitments. On the 31st of July, Taiwan authorities revealed that as of the end of last year, $714 million in contract termination reserves remain stuck in the US and unable to be retrieved. This reserve fund is a standard requirement mandated by the US during the process of military procurement project, set aside to recover any losses if the contract is terminated early. Any remaining balance is typically refunded to the buyer at the end of the project. The US regulations allows a federally licensed bank approved by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency to provide the procurement party with a letter of credit instead of a contract terminating reserve. However, at the end of last year, the US still refused to offer a license to any bank in Taiwan, citing the need for further evaluation by its agencies due to policy adjustments. According to Taiwan's United Daily News, several U.S. military procurement projects have experienced ongoing delays. For instance, Taiwan authorities claim to procure 100 land-based Harpoon missile systems, including 400 missiles with 32 sets and 128 missiles scheduled for delivery in 2026. However, U.S. public records show that the Pentagon only placed the order in 2023, with the project expected to be completed by March 2029. Despite Taiwan authorities being owed a large amount of money by the U.S., its military budget for next year is expected to reach a record high of $19.17 billion. Moving on the 30th of July, a U.S. bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced the Restoring Confidence in the World Anti-Doping Agency Act of 2024, threatening to cut U.S. funding for WADA. China's embassy spokesperson in Washington, Liu Pengyu, criticized the bill, saying the U.S. keeps selling the non-existent case and holds the threat at the international organizations to degrade Chinese athletes and hinder them from participating in the Paris Olympics. This bill will give the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy permanent authority to reduce or revoke U.S. funding for WADA. It came less than half a month after the U.S. received a warning by WADA on the 16th of July, criticizing its use of non-compliant laws against Chinese swimmers. The New York Times also published an article titled "China Citing Tinted Burgers Cleared Swimmers in a New Doping Dispute." This once again misrepresented the facts surrounding 2 Chinese swimmers who tested positive for methanolone due to food contamination in 2022 Tokyo Olympics. According to the relevant provisions of the anti-doping rules and the World Anti-Doping Code, the athletes were without fault or negligence in this case and decided not to pursue doping violation charges against them. The handling of the case was promptly communicated to WADA and the International Swimming Federation, both of which acknowledged and accepted the decision. In addition, WADA said it would take the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency to the Independent Compliance Review Committee, a move that could deprive the U.S. of its rights to host the 2028 Summer and 2034 Winter Olympics. However, Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn, a co-sponsor of the bill, asserted the International Olympic Committee and WADA has tried to strong-arm the U.S. into dropping an FBI investigation into the matter by threatening its right to host the Winter Games in 2034. Adding that the U.S. will not give up to promote fair play, and this bill can help WADA to ensure fair representation on its governing bodies. Any country competing in an international sporting event must be compliant with the Anti-Doping Code, but this bill will serve as a stronger version of the Rodchenkov Act, attempting to replace international rules and imposing U.S. laws on athletes from other countries while exempting U.S. athletes. Despite the US continuing to use its non-compliant laws against Chinese swimmers, China has so far won 5 medals in swimming events. While we have our eyes on Paris, an important European figure chose to look at China. On the 31st July, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni concluded her 5-day official visit to China. During a meeting on the 29th July, Meloni met with Chinese President Xi Jinping and other Chinese senior officials at Diaoyutai State Guest House in Beijing, and made commitment that Italy is willing to promote China-Europe trade development and relaunch its cooperation with China. She also pointed out that the insecurity is growing at the international level. China is a very important interlocutor to deal with all these dynamics. Before Meloni's visit to China, the US and EU expressed opposition. They did not want Italy, a member of the Western Bloc, to become too pro-China. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has repeatedly urged EU countries to respond to the US call for decoupling with China. Nevertheless, this is Meloni's first visit to China since Italy's withdrawal from the Belt and Road Initiative on the 6th December 2023. In early March of this year, the Italian National Statistic Institute revised the deficit as a percentage of GDP from 5.3% to 7.2%, with a total increase of about 39 billion euros, more than twice the average level of the 27 EU countries. In April, the figure was revised to 7.4%, making Italy top of the EU fiscal deficit list. Despite pressure from its allies, Italy expressed that it still wanted to maintain strong trade relationship with China. During the visit, Italy and China signed a 3-year action plan. This plan included agreements in areas like food safety, industry, trade, investment, education, and environmental protection. This trip was also seen as an effort by Italy to clarify any misunderstanding about its previous withdrawal and stressing the importance of economic ties with China. And that is all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Current.